Hello, all, and welcome back into another episode of A Level Deeper. I'm Chad Miles. I gotta tell you, it feels good. I'm recording this intro from the road. Eileen and I are back traveling full time in our van. I am currently sitting in a park in Franklin, Tennessee, which is a few miles south of Nashville. We're making our way down to Florida. It feels great to be traveling again. It feels great to be in new places and having that sense of adventure and newness every single day. It's not necessarily easy. There's a lot of challenges of living in a van and being on the road as well. But as I'm sitting here recording this, it feels good. It feels really good. Now, this conversation that I'm sharing today was not recorded from the road. It was recorded while we were back in Michigan with our families. So this was a couple of weeks ago. I'm excited to share my interview with Anna Okerhjelm, and Anna is a human. Professionally, she currently serves as the studio director for Pophouse, which is a Detroit-based interior design agency. And as I share with Anna, I think that title almost intimidated me a little bit leading up to our conversation. But we had a really fun discussion about design in general and how Anna experiences some of the spaces that she has played a role in creating and designing. As a fellow creator, I'm always curious as to how people interact with and perceive the things that they make, and how do they feel when other people experience the things that they make, or other people comment on the things that they make. So I asked Anna a series of those questions early in our conversation, which I thought was fun. And then we started to peel back some of the layers to Anna's story. And it's just a great reminder that the people that we are professionally, or the titles that we hold, it's just one part of our lives. And there's so much more to who we are as people and our stories. And so we talk about why Anna went down the route of becoming an interior designer in the first place. We talk about a big move that she made after college and how maybe it wasn't the move that some of her close friends or family would have chosen for her, but why she made that move and some of the intentionality she put behind the decisions she made in her life at that time. In the middle of our chat, we had this powerful discussion on control and some of the events in Anna's life that were very much outside of her control, and how she decided to respond to those events, like the sudden loss of a loved one and working through infertility issues. Anna opens up about some of those aspects of her story and shares some of the perspective of how you might be able to support someone who's going through similar experiences that Anna has gone through. Lastly, we end with talking about how a conversation like this can have a role in the business world, and how it just seems like if we can understand each other a little bit deeper and connect with each other a little bit more fully, isn't that a good thing for business and outside of business, and maybe just in all aspects of life? Anyway, I'll let you decide based on the conversation that we have. I'm looking forward to sharing the rest of this podcast, and here is my discussion with Anna Okerhjelm. I am grateful that people like yourself are willing to enter into this very undefined space with me and explore what we might find.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. I was actually listening to your episode with PJ Jenkins, and he was talking about how he likes to orchestrate and control and understand all the details of what he's walking into. And that is so me. I'm such a type A person. So I was like, oh, this is so uncomfortable for me to not even know what I'm walking into, what we're going to talk about. And I took his advice of flipping the fear into opportunity and really looking at it positively. And I was like, it's magical. I am a person that, I will die if I have to small talk. Get me into a conversation that is deep and real, and I will sit there with you for hours. It just is draining for me to pretend. I'd rather just get to a deeper level, which sounds funny, but literally I was like, okay, if I look at this as just my favorite type of conversation to have with people, then that's really exciting for me. And it's a great opportunity, because that's my favorite thing to do, honestly. And it's how you get to gain perspective from other people and voice your experiences, which we don't always do enough, I think. So I took a little bit of his advice, and I was like, that actually helped reframe it quite a bit for me.
I love that you said that. That has been that is why I started this show, is that I always found myself feeling the same, and that small talk, it just doesn't do it for me. And like you said, it's exhausting. It's something that I find it drains all of my energy. What I really want is I want to be able to connect with someone. I want to be able to hear their story. I want to be curious. And that was really the foundation of what this show is. And it's interesting how our mind still does that to us, where we're entering into a space that we have both said, like, we want something like this. And yet our mind still tries to convince us that it's something that we shouldn't do.
Are you sure? Yeah. Yeah.
So for people listening, unfortunately, this conversation was supposed to be in person. We were going to be in one of the spaces that you have worked to design. Some injuries got in the way of that happening. That's just the way that life goes. The question that I wanted to ask you, we were chatting about, so I'm sitting here recording in my van. And so I've gone through a very basic experience of having to design a space and then create that space and then exist in that space. What I wanted to ask you, if we were sitting in one of your spaces, but I'm going to ask it anyway, is how do you experience the spaces that you have designed, or the spaces that you have played a role in creating? When you sit and you exist in those spaces, what is that experience like for you?
It's a good question. And thinking about it, it's surprising that no one has asked me that before. So kudos on the question, first of all.
Check.
I think, yeah. Well, it's funny because moving into our office, which has been honestly a work in progress for the past 2+ years, our team has really poured their all into it, and we took it to heart. It's a space that has to function for us. It has to comfortably host guests, clients, social events. Like, the level of hospitality needs to be really fine-tuned. There's such a blend now between work and play and hosting. Like, it's all one thing now. So for us, it was such an undertaking, and we really wanted to get it right. And in design, you're never going to get things right 100% of the time. And you just need to be comfortable with that, which is an uncomfortable thing. Sitting in the space, it feels surreal because it's ours. I think there's always a little bit of the designer's mind that you're critiquing, and you're looking around and you're looking at opportunities for things you could have done differently or better or fine-tuned. But I think the overwhelming feeling, which is why I do what I do, is I designed this. I built this with a team, with so many voices, so many perspectives. It's now a reality, and projects can take years. So it's a payoff that you wait quite a bit for. But it's very, very well worth it. And for us at Pophouse, our mission and what we do is all about positively impacting people. So whether that is an office, whether it's a residential project, a hospitality project, retail, we want to create spaces that people want to be in and that leave them better off. And so for us, like that's why we do it. And it's so exciting to see a space come to life and see people interacting with it. And, you take the feedback, good and bad, and you learn from it. But that's just part of the design process. Not everyone's going to be, speaking praises, but, we have built this space for our team and have heard nothing but great things. And it's just such an opportunity that I feel very grateful to have, because our team built it together.
Yeah, it's sort of one thing when you get to exist in the space and see what you have created and just kind of sit there. And I can so appreciate the two sides of it. The one side of having pride for the thing that you've created. The other side of, it's almost like you just have too much information about the whole experience, and all the little
absolutely.
decisions that were made and everything that happened, and you can look and you can point and be like, oh, we had to do all of this. Yeah. We had to compromise here, or we had to make a change there. So I can very much resonate with that experience. What is it like as other people start to experience a space that you have created and you've poured all of this intentionality into, and whether they're people that are part of your team or they're people from the public, someone like me potentially coming into your space for the first time, how does that feel to welcome people into this space that you have poured so much into?
It feels great. And there is a sense of pride, and it's actually really great perspective because we have been just in the past week or two since we moved in, welcoming a ton of people in to tour them. And because we are so close to it and we've seen all of the messiness behind the scenes, and, ooh, don't look at that millwork too closely. It's on our punch list, right? Like there's so many details that you're like, don't look at that. But the overwhelming feeling when people come in is just, wow, this is phenomenal and such great feedback. And so it flips your perspective and I think allows you to see it fresh from someone else's vantage point rather than picking away at it, because as designers, we're always going to do that. And we have had a chance to work in some of our clients' spaces while we were waiting to move into this office, which we're very fortunate to have the opportunity to do. And when you start to utilize a space you've designed for someone else, you can kind of pick up pain points and look at things that also you would have done differently. But that's such a good learning opportunity. So I think there's always going to be this period of moving into a new space, using it, breaking it a little bit, and figuring out how you do need to adjust or think about rhythms differently, or just use cases of spaces. So yeah, the overwhelming feeling is just excitement and pride. And I think other people walking into it for the first time, that's the perspective that like we need to see as designers, to kind of put away the noise of, don't look at that too closely, or we had to value engineer. There's no drapery in here, right? Like there's always going to be budget that you have to fight with.
And there's always those things that and you recognize, but someone coming into the space for the first time, they're probably never going to think about any of those things or recognize any of those things.
Never.
And
yeah.
Right. Take us inside. I'm curious how the mind of Anna works when you are, you talked about existing in some of the spaces that you've designed for some of your clients. And I'm also curious about when you are in any space on a day-to-day basis, like, are you analyzing certain things about the space? Are you paying attention to certain things? I'm just curious about how in general you experience the different spaces that you exist in.
That's a good question. Yeah, I think my husband comments that if we're out to dinner, I'm looking at everything but him. Because you do walk into a space as a designer and it's hard to take that hat off, and you're going to, one, use it as an opportunity to look for inspiration. But two, you're just taking it in. You want to understand how the space makes you feel. And is it a good response? Is it a poor response? Like, I think it's so top of mind that to us as designers, the impact space has. And I think people feel that. I just don't know if they recognize it or connect it. So I'm walking into a space, I'm studying it. Sometimes I'm getting on the ground and I'm looking under a chair to see who the manufacturer is, because I want to specify it, right? It's like, what is this? I'm flipping things over. So sometimes I can be a little bit of a monster from that perspective. But yeah, I'm taking it in, and I'm kind of taking mental note of really great design details, or, ooh, the acoustics in here aren't great. What could make that better? Like, I think you go into problem solving mindset, whether it's a space you designed or not.
It makes so much sense. I think we all, in our own sort of area of expertise or area of experience, we have these things that we might notice that no one else would. I just think about sometimes if I take out my camera and I start doing photography, and I'm like pausing at all these weird random places and these weird angles, and like I'm laying on the floor somewhere to take some shot that appealed to me, and my wife is just like, what are you doing? But that's the way the mind works, right? You're seeing all these different things that someone else wouldn't see or wouldn't notice.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's it's good and bad because it is hard to turn off. But, I just think that it does go back to why I'm so passionate about what I do. There is so much opportunity to think about space more thoughtfully and how it makes people feel, because it doesn't matter if you're at the grocery store, it doesn't matter if you're at work, at home. And we all know how that is at home. You're curating and choosing things that make you feel good. And whether that is like the right design decision or not, it doesn't matter. It's your home. It should be a safe space. It should be comfortable. But when it comes to an office or, a hotel, there are so many personas you have to think about. Who's interacting with this space? What's the experience they're going to have walking through it? So it's not just how a room makes you feel. What's the transition between these two rooms? What's the journey going through the space? And how are you welcoming people in? And also making it an intuitive experience so you're not making people feel uncomfortable. Just a simple thing like wayfinding. If people don't know where to go, right? Like that's part of, I think, the conversation too. Like I want to go into a space and feel like I'm taken care of and feel like it's intuitive to know where to go, what to do. Otherwise, you're feeling lost. So I think there's so many layers to design that go a little bit unnoticed, but are so critical to really to making people feel comfortable and that they want to be there and they come back. It goes down to the success of the space, I think.
It's interesting. It stood out to me that you've used the word feeling often throughout this conversation and the way that spaces make people feel. I don't know. I guess it stood out to me because I don't know if I ever really pay much attention to how a space makes me feel, at least consciously. But yet, maybe it comes out in different ways as we're just talking about, I really liked, how that looked, or I liked that it was bright or something like that. We might point out visual elements to it. Tell me more about when you think about in your prioritizing how spaces make people feel. What are some of the feelings that are important that you evoke with the things that you're designing and creating?
It really depends on the type of space. Our team does extensive research. We have a discovery phase up front where we're thinking about the use case. We're thinking about the personas that are going to utilize the space on a daily basis. And it could be wildly different. We worked on a training and development center for one of our clients in the past few years. And that was all about tapping into space that would make people feel productive, would be conducive to learning. It goes down to color theory, even psychological safety with how you're positioning someone within the space. Is their back, to a door? Or is their back to an aisleway? You have to think about the visual and acoustical distraction that could potentially occur. So when you think about that type of a space or a workspace, you're really having to look at the entire community, and we often call it a neighborhood, right? What are the amenity spaces that you're building in for the entire community to use, and to make them feel supported and draw them in? But there is always the individual level, an aspect of the space where you really need to pay attention to the space you're providing for that individual. Can they do what they need to do? Can they step away? There's so many pieces to it, like wellness rooms, right? Can you get away and take a call? Can you get away and take a moment, meditate, whatever you need to do as an individual to be your whole self? And when we talk about our process, it is about human-centric, curated, and informed design. We're always going to go in with a strategy and really understand the needs of the space and the users. We are going to look at the brand and make sure we're pulling forth things that are going to inspire people that are using the space. And we want to make sure that everything we're building in has the comfort, the functionality, the form. Of course, like it's got to be beautiful, but more than that, it needs to function. And so it's all those little details that are going to give people the feeling of, I want to be here, I belong here, and I have what I need. This space is providing for me. I don't know if that really answered the question, but that's a little bit about our process in terms of how we figure out what we need to do. And it all stems from use case.
I mean, it helps pull back the curtain to the infinite number of decisions that you're making as you're talking about things like psychological safety and is my back position to a door or to an aisleway. I just find that so interesting, and these are the types of things, especially with people who create something that I don't create. I I like learning about what goes into the process, because it can be easy to assume when you just walk into a space. I don't know. I think we tend to assume it's just simple, and oh yeah, you just kind of, I don't know. You pick out some fabric, or you pick out some wall color, paint, or decor, and you just kind of put the space together. I find it so fascinating to hear about so many of the decisions and so many of the things that I would never even think about and consider. Does it ever get like almost frustrating that you feel like people maybe don't have an appreciation for all of the little decisions that go into creating these types of spaces?
I guess I never really thought about that. I at some level, probably, because when you work so hard on something, like, that's our craft. That's our work. So when you think about all that went into it, you want people to understand and appreciate the decisions that you made with them or on their behalf to make it a space that's going to work best for them. So of course, there's a little bit of that where you're like, we toiled over this wall covering versus, right? There's so many decisions that I think do happen behind the scenes that we take so seriously, every little detail. It matters. It's going to matter in the final output. And so you do love to take the opportunity to educate people on those things when you have the chance. But also, there's something about it where I don't expect people to look at it at that level and that deep. Like, if it makes you feel good, I've done my job, right? If you want to be in that space, if you are leaving your home office to go into work, I've done my job, right? If you are booking a room at the hotel, we've done our job. So it's kind of like, I don't need you to understand the pain that went with selecting that boucle over that mohair, whatever the fabric is. I just need you to love it and feel like it was meant to be in that space. So it's a little bit double-sided, I would say.
Okay, so walk us back in some of your story. When did interior design become the thing that you wanted to dedicate and commit yourself to? And was there something before that? Tell us a story of how we got here.
Sure. It's funny. I was thinking about it the other day, and I don't know why or when this manifested, but since I was little, I had sketchbooks and sketchbooks of houses, and I would just draw and sketch floor plans and homes. And I actually thought that I would pursue architecture when I was a bit younger, but I always had this draw towards design, and I've always come at it from a split of like a more creative brain, but also a more like business sided logical brain, which I think my position right now suits really well. But I think my parents were like, what are you doing with all these piles of sketchbooks with floor plans and houses? And I would ask to rearrange my room every other week. And they're like, just do what you got to do, work out whatever you're working out. And I also felt really sure of where I wanted to go to school. I ended up going to Miami University of Ohio, in Oxford, Ohio. And I studied interior design there with a minor in entrepreneurship. And for me, I don't know if it was like someone in my life that I saw that went there, but I was like, I'm applying to Miami, and that's the only school I'm applying to, and that's where I want to go. I was just like laser focused, and I don't know where it came from. So I have to think it was just this drive where I kind of saw that path from a young age. And I will tell you, design school is not easy. There were days and weeks where you're sitting in studio and you're like, everyone is out partying, drinking. I am toiling over this deadline. It's going to be an all-nighter. Someone cut their finger off, right? It's a little bit manic, but I thought about so many times, like, there could have been easier paths for me, but this was what I wanted to do, and I stuck with it. I did end up moving home briefly. I'm from Cincinnati, and I moved home briefly after I graduated, which was the most dismal time to graduate in 2009, when there were 0 jobs in the industry.
Bad timing.
Which was also, a unique challenge. So I moved home. I found a job in retail. I was devastated, right? You come out of school, you're like, I am so excited to do what I just spent 4 years, toiling over. So I think that I was a little bit worried at that point that I would never get into the industry and it would be wasted. But I did end up moving to Detroit a year or so after that. And I moved for a boy, of course. That's what one does sometimes in their life, someone I'd been dating throughout school. But I did it with my own agenda. I was like, look, I'm going to find my own place. I want to land on my own 2 feet. I found a job nannying because I figured if I moved there, got myself established, I could start looking for jobs in the industry. And so it was a little bit of a hustle. I found my roommates on Craigslist. Actually, one of them is a great friend now. So it works out. But there was some hustle in that.
I want to pause for a moment because you had mentioned as we were preparing for this episode that this decision to move to Detroit was maybe not necessarily a very welcomed or celebrated decision by everyone in your life.
No, I think twofold. If you would have asked my parents which one of their children would move away, and we all moved away at some point. I have 2 other siblings, and they would have never said that it would be me. So the fact that I decided to pick up and move away, which granted it's 4 hours, it's not a long drive. I am like the biggest homebody. Give me my people. I want to be at home. I want to be close to those I love. So that was a shock. But the overwhelming majority of the feedback was, why are you moving to Detroit? What is happening in Detroit? 1, are you going to be safe? 2, it was just at that time, because I've been here 12 plus years now, so it feels like home. But at that point, there was still a lot of opportunity for the city to pick itself up. And when I did get the job downtown, I was driving down. There was 0 traffic. It was a breeze. Downtown was desolate still, I will say. So yeah, there was a little bit of skepticism, I would say. So I felt like I was fighting some of that, and I had a little bit to prove also.
Yeah, I mean, I think back to being from the Metro Detroit area and growing up here. Detroit in 2008, 2009 wasn't necessarily, it wasn't the same Detroit that it is today. If you go downtown today, you're going to see a very vibrant place, lots going on, lots of people, lots of construction, lots of storefronts and restaurants, and you're going to see a lot of things going on there. But that was not the case. That was not the same Detroit that you were moving to. No. Fresh out of college.
No, all my peers were headed to New York, Chicago, all of these big cities. But I will say, looking back, it is the best decision I made for myself. And of course, it was personally tied to someone else in my life. But I was adamant about facilitating the move in a way that would serve me first and foremost. And so Detroit, to me, this city is home now. The opportunity that I have had in Detroit, I would never have had in New York, in Chicago, in LA. It's just a city that feels like such a community, and it's full of creatives. It's a supportive community. Everyone wants to lift each other up. I don't think that I would have the same career I have now if I hadn't made that choice. And so when I look at some of the other paths some of my peers took, like at first, of course, you're comparing, but I think it's the best decision I made for my career. And honestly, personally too, that has proven to be true. So although it was a hard decision to make, I'm so glad that I trusted my gut to do that.
One thing that stood out to me is as you were talking about, you moved here because of a boy, and you also, it sounds like, were very intentional about recognizing the importance of having some of your own life and making some of your own decisions as well. Talk us through that a little bit, because for someone young out of college, that seems like a very mature way of looking at moving somewhere because of a relationship.
Yeah, I think I'm a middle child. I'm really stubborn. I'm really independent. It's the Aquarian in me. I am like, I don't need anybody. So although like if you are my people, I love you fiercely and you are my people. And to me, it is quality over quantity. So relationships to me are the most important thing in my life. But on the flip side, I'm going to do what I need to do for me. And I never wanted to hitch that success to someone else or have it hinge on someone else. So in my mind, if I was going to make this move, really make an effort to break into my industry, I needed to do it on my own. And I didn't want to give myself the option to rely on someone else. So although I had to be scrappy and pay rent on a nanny job and still be looking for jobs at night in my industry, I was like, this is what I have to do. And I have to prove to myself that I can do this without relying on anybody else. So I think that was the underlying force there.
Again, I just think that's a very mature perspective to have. You know, I'm a big believer in we should always, being in community with other people or being in a relationship with someone else is an important thing. I think as humans, I think we need that. And the ultimate relationship that we need to have is with ourselves. And you know, I just think having that mindset of, I need to be okay on my own. I need to be able to be independent on my own. And if that is the case, and I find someone that I can share my life with, or, you know, I find friends or community, that's an added bonus. That's something additional on top of that. Again, that seems like a notable decision that you made that I think we can all take some notes on.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that. I have always been told I'm an old soul. I have maybe, I don't know. I've looked into it more recently because I think just spiritually, I've gone through things in my life that have made me try to connect experiences I've had and think a little bit deeper about why I function the way I do and why, you know, I make the decisions that I've made. And also looking back, I am so glad that I had that perspective with that move, because I did end up losing that person in my life. And he very tragically passed away at the age of 27, quite suddenly. It rocked my entire world. I think that at that point, everyone expected me to pick up and move home. And I think I expected myself to do that. Right? Like that was shattering, and it did the opposite, which is really interesting. And I don't know. I think it was a little bit of grief motivated me in a weird way. You know, of course, I dealt with some heavy time. I saw therapists. I was in a dark place, but overwhelmingly, the feeling I had was, I need to be here. There is a reason I'm here. He brought me here. And I have something that I still need to prove for myself and to prove that this all was worth it, if that makes sense. It's hard to explain. So much so that after he passed away, my mom would be like, just come home for the weekend. Just come home for the week, right? Just be with family, which, yeah, that sounds lovely. And I couldn't even leave the state. I was just like emotionally and physically bound here. I was like, this is where I need to be right now. And it was this huge force that I felt. And lifting myself out a little bit of the fog of grief, I felt like I needed to focus on me and to keep moving forward and just putting my all into proving that I could do it. I don't know if that's normal with grief, but it's the path that it led me on. And, grief changes over time, but I still look back and I truly feel like I was supposed to be here. This is the right path. And all of those events just strengthened me in the end. So a little heavy, but I think it's an important part of my story because it's really changed and shaped my perspective on life.
Yeah. In what ways has it done that? I lost my dad when I was 17 years old, and it's had a lot of really profound impacts on the way that I think and the way that I view life. So I can understand some of the heaviness of losing someone important in your life too early. How has it changed some of your perspective on things? How has it changed some of the ways that you go about viewing life?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm sorry about your father. It is, once you go through losing someone really close to you, it takes a minute, but when you find your footing, I think for me, I mentioned type A person. I like to control things as much as possible. And it humbles you and you just realize that you're here for this ride and that's not the case. And I think that one, it made me approach situations with much more empathy, not only in my work, but just in personal relationships, people I don't even know, right? Like just across the board. And two, I had to let go a little bit of control and realize that I'm trying to look too far ahead and figure out my path. And I really need to be a little more present because that's hard for me to do. And I even just said to my husband with this ankle sprain injury, I'm like, the universe is telling me to sit still and to stop. And I was talking to a friend. She's like, it's your right foot. It's your driving foot. It like literally the universe is like, step off the gas. I'm thinking too far ahead. So I continue to be served these lessons where, I need to let go a little bit. So, I think it's hard to know all the ways grief shapes us, but for me, it's just allowed me, I think, to love better and deeper and take those in my life, and make them a priority because you just really you don't have any control and you don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. But also going back to the experience of moving here and setting up success for myself, it was a lesson. And you do have to first take care of yourself before you can take care of anyone else. Because in that relationship, I was trying so hard to take care of someone else that I began drowning in it. And that's a hard thing to learn also.
You talked about empathy, and I guess I'm curious about how that's shown up. Is it just having more of a understanding as you interact with people on a day-to-day basis that they might be going through something like you went through and that you could just have no idea?
Absolutely. And it's come up in other areas of my life too. Like, and I mentioned, I like sit down with me and I want to have a conversation. I want to know who you are. I want to know why you think the way you think. I want to know what your experiences are. I don't want to pretend. I don't want to talk about the weather. I know, right? Like I want to get to know you. And I call myself an extroverted introvert because at the core, like it's exhausting to me. But I am a people person and I love to get to know people, but it has to be meaningful or I'm not interested. So yeah, I think that quality paired with trying to look at things in a more empathetic way and understand that so many people had no idea what I was going through when I was at rock bottom. And the people that empathized and were kind, those little things you just don't forget. And you don't forget who shows up for you. So I think it is just taking a step back and showing that same empathy back to others. And I always, although it's difficult, I always want to talk about my experiences because there's probably a lot of people, even in your own circle, that are going through the same thing or something similar that you're not aware of. And that we have been on a wild fertility journey the past few years too, and trying to have our son, which we're so lucky to have a 1-year-old at this point, which is really exciting. But I am the first person to talk about it. I'm like, can we talk about this? There are so many people going through this. And if I can be someone to lean on or a support or a resource, I want to shout that from the rooftop. Like, I just want to help. So I think it's allowed me to be a little more open just with some of the experiences I've had as well to try and lean into others.
Let's talk about that experience. So, I'm thinking back to the word control that you've talked about in liking to have control over things. And it seems like in the course of this conversation, that's another example of life telling you or reminding you that you might not be in control as much as you think you are. When you approached wanting to start a family and in going through some of those challenges, what was that experience like for you?
It was devastating. The only thing I knew for sure in my life since I was a little girl was that I wanted to be a mother. Like, I have always had this maternal draw. It's something I knew I always wanted to do. When my husband and I got married, I had this feeling that we were going to have issues getting pregnant. And I just think that I had an intuition about it. And I don't know if it's because I truly had this intuition or if it's because it's something I wanted so bad that I was afraid, again, that I wouldn't be able to control the outcome. And we went through years of fertility treatments to get to our son. We went through IVF, multiple rounds of IVF, and are so lucky that we had success and have set up, hopefully success for our future to have additional children. But we had been married maybe 6 months to a year when we started trying. So that's a new marriage. There are a lot of things you're learning about your partner, you're trying to navigate, and then you throw that in the mix, and also the pandemic. So you're stuck at home. It was a dark year or two. It was another humbling experience of I don't have any control and I just have to lean into this. But we went through it, and through that experience, there are so many other people in my life that I opened up to that have also gone through something similar, and they've been a huge support system. And so going back to I'm like, I'll talk about it all day long. If it helps someone else. So yeah, we are very lucky. I know that it doesn't always end in success for every couple that goes through IVF, but really, really thankful because that was always something that I was sure about, that I wanted to be a mother and that it was what I was meant to do.
I mean, I appreciate you sharing. My wife and I are approaching 30, and we are at the age where a lot of our friends are starting families. That is something I would love to be a father someday. It's not something that is currently in the cards, but is something that we would like to build towards in the future. But I have become a lot more aware of the fact that as we are at that age and people are wanting to start families, that the conversation around infertility has become one that I guess I wasn't aware of. And maybe it's because it hasn't been well talked about. It can be a difficult conversation to bridge or to start, but I don't know. Growing up, I feel like you just kind of assume, like, well, I mean, everyone that wants to have kids, they just do, and it's relatively easy.
No big deal, yeah.
So, how going through that experience? I mean, what were the conversations that you wanted to have with people, or what were the questions that you wanted to be asked by people, or not asked, or what do you want them to say or do? I'm curious, because I think maybe there's something we can all learn, because it feels like if we do know someone who is struggling with infertility, it feels like one of those things where you're just like, oh, I just don't know if I should bring it up. It feels like a
Right.
difficult or awkward conversation. So as someone who went through that, I don't know, what would be some of your perspective to share with the rest of us?
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question. And there were so many moments where I would get questions, or we would get questions. When are you having kids? Why are you pregnant yet? Those just cut so deep. And of course, it's not coming from an ill will place. People are generally excited for you and excited to see you build your family. But if you take a step back and think about that question, one, maybe we don't want kids. Maybe we're not able to have kids. Maybe we are going through IVF. So there were a lot of questions I got that I had to brush off or pretend that, everything's fine. Because when you're going through it, you're not wanting to kind of show your hand and play out right. We're not sure if this is going to work. We did keep it a little closer to ourselves when we were going through IVF. But I think as I started to open up to people, it's less about what you say and more about just being a support system and listening. Because if you're in that position, sometimes you just want to sit in silence and you need someone to sit with you. Other times you just want to talk about it and get it out. And that's therapeutic. And you're not really looking for someone to solve the problem. They're not going to solve the problem for you. Chances are anything they say is not going to make you feel better, because when you would get everything's going to work out, it's going to be fine, my knee-jerk reaction is to say, you don't know that, and it might not be fine, right? So it's more so just being there and listening and asking, what do you need in this moment? Do you need someone to listen? Do you want advice? Like, I think approaching it and asking the person what they need from you is a good way to start, or just simply saying, I'm here for you. Let me know what you need. Because it can be awkward, and some people don't want to talk about it in great detail. Some people, like, I'm an open book. I'll tell you whatever you want to know. But I think the assumption too, which was a situation in our case, is that it's always a female problem. And at this point in our society, it is 50-50 male factor, female factor when it comes to infertility. And not that that matters, but I think that when you talk about it, there are assumptions made. And it's hard. This is something we are meant to do. We are meant to procreate. And you're like, this isn't working for us. You feel like a failure. Your body feels like a failure. You're going through it. And also with fertility treatments, you end up looking like you're 5 months pregnant half the time because you're so bloated from all the medicine. And people ask you if you're pregnant. Don't ever ask that. Don't ever ask that. Like, there was one situation where I just broke down in tears and I had to just walk away. So it's just the empathy and recognizing that you don't know what's going on behind the scenes. And sometimes it's just letting the person know you're there for them. That would be my main advice.
I think that's very helpful and insightful. As I hear you saying that, it takes me back to a couple of these dang words that keep coming back, which is, words like listening and words like support and words like, I just kind of see that as holding space for people. And I guess I just keep getting reminded through the course of this show and these conversations that that seems to be a recurring theme, and that seems to be the most powerful thing that we can offer to someone else is just the opportunity to make them feel like they are heard, feel like they are seen. And it sounds like, from what you're saying, that's really what you were looking for and wanted in those moments, is just someone to hold that space for you and let them know that they see you and that they're there.
Absolutely. And I think it applies to so many areas of our lives. And I think too, it's just about slowing down and allowing for that space and allowing for the experiences that people have, because it's profound if you start to open up and give people your ear and hear what they have to say. And I have made so many meaningful connections and developed so many relationships based on my experiences here in Detroit, whether it was through work, some of these personal experiences. People are just coming out of the woodwork, right? When you're going through something and you're open about it and you start to be a little bit more vulnerable, I think that's one, where you grow, and two, where you're going to find your people, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I'm sitting here thinking about the course of our conversation, and here you are, this designer. And as a designer, you are planning and creating the spaces that you want to exist in and that you want to exist in the world. And how it's been sort of an interesting, as I listen to your story, I've got to imagine life hasn't panned out maybe as you would have initially designed. How does that feel as you look back on some of these different experiences and some of these hardships that you've gone through? I guess, I'm imagining that's not what you would have designed as the designer. This isn't what you would have planned or tried to control. How do you view some of these different experiences that you've gone through in your life as we sit here today?
It's very true. It's not right. Like when you look forward, it's like, this is all best case scenario, right? It is. This is where I want to go. This is how I'm going to do it. And it's rosy. It's a rosy picture. I have the perspective now of looking back, and I am sure I will have many more experiences in my life that either humble me or bring me to my knees or totally rock me. But looking back, although it's not what I would have chosen, it makes sense now. And I think that it has turned me into the person I am today. And it's better than I could have mapped it. And that's the part where it's like, you got to give up the reins, just not sit back, right? There is such power in looking forward and manifesting and thinking about why you're making the decisions you're making and where you want to go and what it takes to get there. But you do need to let go a little bit. And I don't think that I would be where I am today without some of these heavy or more tragic things that I've gone through. So it all works out, right? Maybe not the way you planned, but I think it works out the way it's supposed to. And if you can tap into that and try to learn from it rather than, right, we're all going to have our like, woe is me. Like all week too, I'm like, I'm just feeling sorry for myself. I don't have time for this ankle sprain. Like, why? And you're like, I'm not in control. I need to just go with the flow and do what I can. So yeah, it's been a lesson I think that I've continuously had to learn in this lifetime. But I wouldn't trade it.
It's like life is going to consistently give us what we need.
Yes.
But not always what we want.
Yep. But it's better, right? I'm like this, even just looking at the IVF experience, I'm like, this brought me my son, and he I look at him and I'm like, I have known you for years. You were meant for us. This is, the journey all makes sense. And it couldn't be any different, right? This is how it was supposed to be. We got here to this point and it's you. And although it took a little bit of science, which thank God, right? It is a miracle, and it just makes you reflect, and I think take stock of what's really important. It can be really easy, and I think especially in the creative industry, you can be really hard on yourself and I think get caught up. But it's not what it's about.
So I'm recognizing there's one gap that I think we left in the story, which was that in your path, we left a gap where you were nannying in Detroit, and then somewhere along the line, you became an interior designer. So fill in that gap for us.
There's a little bit of a hustle there too. So I moved to Detroit. I was like, look, I'm going to find whatever job I can. I ended up nannying for the most wonderful family. And they're like a second family to me here. It was the support system I needed that I didn't really recognize I would get. So that was a little bit serendipitous in itself. But I immediately, I landed on my feet. I started looking for something in my industry. And I will say, when I got an internship with the Rocket family of companies, which well through your friend Alan, who was a guest, so fortunate to be part of this family in Detroit. I got an internship, and it was with an interiors company that was more geared towards residential procurement at the time. I literally took a pay cut going to internship, leaving my nannying position. But it was the right choice, and I jumped right in. I was doing things for the company. I mean, literally my leader at the time was like, I think we need to take intern off of your email signature because of the type of stuff that you're doing and you're corresponding. Like we gotta remove that. Like, this is beyond like the gig is up. So I was hired on full time after about 3 to 4 months, which was exactly what I was hoping for. And it was such a great opportunity because at that time, Quicken Loans, now Rocket Mortgage, had just moved to Detroit from the suburbs. Our team had been a part of that transition and that design transformation for them in Detroit. And we started getting questions from clients and requests outside of the family of companies. Can you do our office? Are you interested in working with us? And it was like, let's start a company. Let's spin off this concept and do it for other people also. So I was able to be a part of starting the company. There were about 6 or 7 of us that we started, and it was, let's create a commercial interior design studio that can serve this family of companies with Rocket, but also do work across the country and grow our portfolio and our impact. And the experience that you get when you're part of a startup, so valuable because you are forced to wear many hats. I was kind of doing a bunch of dual roles within the organization and had the opportunity to grow. I've been at the company 11 years now, and I've stepped into new roles and just grown into the role I'm in now as studio director, overseeing our production team. And it's super fulfilling because I get to look back and I understand the business so much more, being involved in growing it and frankly playing some roles that weren't super comfortable for me. But I am a person where I'm going to ask for forgiveness rather than permission. And if I see something that I think needs to be done and that I could do well, I'm going to fill that gap. And I think that some of that tenacity got me to where I am today. And I've also had amazing women along the way that have supported me and given me opportunity that has gotten me here. And that can't go unnoticed either. And so my goal is to always try to give back in that way too with my team. And so that has been a journey just to see the company grow from 6 to we're about 25 now, and do work across the country. And being on the cover of Interior Design Magazine as a team, it was 2 years ago now. Like, dream come true. I was like, we can retire now. We've made it, right? But no, it's such an achievement for our entire team. But you're like, all right, let's keep going. Like, what's next? What do we want to do next?
To be clear, you haven't retired. Did anyone retire after that award?
No, I make that joke. But to us, it was like, this is the pinnacle, right? That was our goal. And to achieve that is just, it is surreal. But it also is the mindset of like, okay, what is next? What are we doing to continue to push forward and innovate? And I think our team is really strategic in that way and thinking forward. And I think it's why we've gotten to where we are today.
So is it the pursuit of better that keeps you going? You know, I'm always curious about, so you win this award and that's like the pinnacle. I'm always curious about people in business or athletes or whoever it may be, people that reach what we all think is the pinnacle. And then they keep going. And you're always like, well, why? You know, didn't they achieve the thing that everyone sets out to achieve? So you achieved that thing. You got the recognition, but it's not over. You're not done. What keeps you going?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, professionally, it's like, what's next? What can I do to push myself? What can we do better or differently as a firm? But I think for me personally, I look at it, especially now with having a child and balancing with personal life a little bit more. Like, I want to do my job. I want to do it well. I want to have impact, but I also want to recognize that that's not what defines me. There's so much more to it. And I want to feel like I have given my all, but also do that personally and go home to my family and focus there. So it's been an interesting lesson too, just becoming a parent and seeing that shift. It's not that my career is less important to me. There are just other things to balance with it. And so it's not necessarily the pursuit of better at this point. It's just being able to do what I know I'm capable of doing and doing it well, but doing the same thing at home, if that makes sense. It's a different makeup of responsibility and just passion for where I'm at in my life. Being on the cover of that magazine, that is so phenomenal for our team, but that's not why I do what I do. Like, I'd be just as passionate today about our team and our work, whether that happened or not. And it's great, but I don't need to be, worried about what's next from that perspective. Like, if we do good things and we're impacting space in a positive way for the people that are using those spaces, I'm like, that's my job. And whether that's recognized or not, right? Like, that's great, but I'm going to go home and I'm going to be good.
Well, and that's a forever mission, right? Creating spaces that impact people, that there's no end to that. That is a limitless pursuit, which I guess is a good thing because there's a lot more spaces that you can design and develop.
Absolutely. Right. Yeah.
So as we start to land the plane on this conversation, I've got to share with you when I want to say thank you to Olivia, who first connected us. And when she first reached out and sent me a message and was like, I think Anna would be a great guest for your show. I kind of saw your title of studio director, and I was kind of like, oh, why does she want to come on this show? My show? Like a level deeper? Are we talking about the same show here? And it's interesting how titles, especially in like the business or professional world, can do some of that. And I've just found myself sitting here and thinking during this conversation how powerful it is to hear someone's story and to hear all of the things that have been behind. You are not just studio director at Pophouse. You are Anna that has a story and a background in so many of the things that you've gone through in your life. And I think about how, I don't know, I guess just from a business perspective, I think understanding people and their stories and all of the things that go into who they are and how they show up professionally, I just see that being such a valuable thing. And I'm like, I think we could all conduct business, and business would benefit in a very human way if we could understand a little bit more about each other and the people that we're interacting with personally and professionally. I don't know. I've just found myself thinking about that, and I'm like, oh, I guess Anna's just another human who's gone through a lot of the same, types of experiences that I have, and it just made me think about that from a business perspective. I feel like we are better off when we understand some of the people that we might be dealing with. I'm curious some of your thoughts on that.
Absolutely. And it's funny you say that, because I think when I messaged back to you, I was like, I'm not that cool. Do you really want to interview me? Like, what do you want to know? Like, I'm just like the first person to be like, yeah, I have some stories to tell. I am proud of where I'm at in my career, but I don't know. Like, I'm intimidated, right? Why do you want to talk to me? So thank you for the opportunity. And talking about just the benefit professionally with getting to know people and having these experiences be heard. We do in our work quite a bit of interviewing and workshopping up front with the users of the space, with the stakeholders, and understanding what their goals and objectives are, what they're looking for. And personal creeps into that sometimes too, right? In order to create spaces that are human-centric, you really do have to understand where people are coming from in their lives and what they're looking for. So there's so much overlap there. And I think for us to do our jobs well, there has to be that component of it. And you really do have to try to make it a point to understand where people are coming from, put yourself in their shoes, and experience a space from that perspective, because you're making a lot of decisions on those users' behalf, and we don't take that responsibility lightly. There are decisions we're making that affect the environment, that affect how people are going to use a space, feel in the space. We want our spaces to feel inclusive and feel welcome, and you can't get there without the human piece. So it is all connected, and I completely agree.
Yeah, that's a beautiful perspective. Okay, the last thing that I don't want to gloss over, you were talking about your time in college. You were mentioning the craziness of deadlines, and you kind of glossed over someone cutting their finger off. Was that a real story?
Yeah. I mean, anyone who is a designer who went through studio classes in college knows that when you're pulling all-nighters, you're sleep deprived, you're on a lot of caffeine, you're building a model, someone inevitably ends up at the ER or the urgent care. There were multiple times. Luckily, it wasn't me, but you just in the middle, it's 2 a.m. and you hear someone scream across the studio, and it's bad. I mean, we had to take a furniture building workshop too and design and build our own piece of furniture, which was also a humbling experience for me. And I was terrified of losing digits, but I made it out alive. So yeah, it's a real thing. Those X-Acto knives can get you.
So just so people are clear, if they think that entering into the interior design world does not come with some occupational hazard, that is not the case, maybe.
Yeah, it's not. I think people tend to look at it and think it's really glam and, oh, you're just picking materials all day, right? It's so much more. And yes, there's some risk there for sure. as there is in any creative industry, I think.
For sure. Well, thank you, Anna, for joining me in this space. Thank you for sharing your story. As we've talked about through the course of this conversation, I just find it continues to be, I think, the most powerful thing that we can do as humans is share ourselves and create. I view my role as just to create a space where someone can share. And my hope is that by doing this, we can model some of the conversations that other people can be having with people in their lives, and going a level deeper into someone's experiences and what they've gone through. I've just yet to see a downside to it. So thank you for being willing to invest into this conversation in this space with me, because I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I truly appreciate the opportunity to talk with you today. And like I said, this is my favorite type of conversation to have, and complete stranger. And thank you for making me feel comfortable and for getting into really meaningful topics. I just appreciate it, and, happy to share my story if others can benefit from it, but also just, it's great to chat with you and get to know you better. So thank you.
If people wanted to find you, connect with you, learn more about the work that you do at Pophouse, what are some ways that they could do that?
Sure. You could follow us on Instagram, Pophouse Design. Can follow our website. We have all of our portfolio work on there. You could reach out directly through that link on our website if you have a project opportunity. I will say we are so open to different types of work. We've really diversified in the past few years. And for us, it's about the mission and what you're trying to achieve. And if that aligns and we feel like we have clients that understand the impact and value of design, there's nothing we can't create together. So feel free to reach out.
Awesome. I'll include some of those links in the show notes of this episode. Anna, thank you so much again for joining me.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for tuning in this week, and make sure you check out all of Anna's social media and check out Pophouse. They are doing some incredible things in Detroit. Some of the spaces that they've designed are really something, and I look forward to visiting the Pophouse headquarters next time maybe Anna and I record a conversation together. As a small independent podcast, your financial donations mean the world to me. So there's a link in the description of this episode that takes you to a platform called Buy Me a Coffee, which sounds exactly as it is. It's an opportunity for you to just buy me a cup of coffee. Those financial donations support late night editing sessions and the creation of the show, and I could not continue doing this without you, so thank you. And thank you, as always, for your attention and for tuning into the show. It means the world to me. I love recording these conversations. I love sharing them, and I can't wait to share another one next week. We'll see you then.